Hello everyone, welcome to another video. This one we're going to be doing another one of our little tool talk things, particularly about this machine. Now that we're in our new space, we have kind of, well, more space to actually talk about something on this scale. And this kind of coincides well with our last video, which was about the electromelter, which is just under there. And it works very well with this machine. So without further ado, let's get into talking. At the very end of this little video, we're also going to change the oil, which is something I've had a few questions about and concerns. It's not very difficult. I'll show you how to do it just at the very end if you're interested. So this is the machine. It's a very simple tool. It's just a box, but it's one of those really necessary things for vacuum casting. Obviously, without a tool that can create a vacuum seal, it's really just gravity pouring. And if you've ever tried that, maybe like with sand casting, for example, it works sometimes. For other designs, it's just impossible. You need to have some form of assistance helping the metal get to where it needs to go, whether that's a centrifuge throwing the material in, or something like this, vacuuming, pulling the metal along. So this is a two-in-one system, as you can see. This side is for vacuuming the investment. You mix your investment in a rubber tub or whatever you're mixing, it doesn't really matter, and you put it under the dome. You switch between the two sides just with this little lever thing. It's already labeled, investment table in the casting chamber, and you just turn it on accordingly. Now, when it's on the investment side, it is pulling through this little raised knob brass thing fitting. And the reason it's this high is because if you get investment bubbling out the top of whatever you're doing, it doesn't get sucked into the machine and then harden in the plumbing, and your machine is completely screwed. You would have to take it apart and clean out every little bit of it if that happened. I've only had that happen once. I think I wrapped my flask in it wasn't the greatest paper material, and the paper basically just fell apart and investment oozed everywhere. You can actually still see, I apologize, my machine's kind of dirty because it sees a lot of use, but there's like little bits of investment stuck everywhere, and I've wiped it down numerous times, but it when it gets in places, it stays. So something very important to note with this machine is that if you're working on one side, you need to make sure that the other side is clear. In other words, if, say, I put a flask on this side to do the cast, as soon as I go to vacuum release, it's using the opposite side to draw the air in and release the vacuum. So in other words, if I have this dome on and I go to release from a cast, it can't do that. And then this dome actually holds the vacuum, and everything is then locked in place, and you kind of have to let it just come down or wiggle it out. It's one of those things where just don't let it happen and it's not a problem. So speaking of the casting side, we can talk a little bit about that. This is where most of the magic happens, and where it's definitely the most important that it works the best. Now this tub here is like cast aluminum or something. It's quite well built as far as I can tell. It seems very thick, well made, custom made for this type of machine. I believe it's cast. There's a seam line up here. But something I just want to note, down here, I'm not sure if you can see it very well in the camera, but there's a little hole. This little hole is where the plumbing is attached and draws the vacuum from. It's not directly on the bottom. The overall depth of this tub is about 7.5 inches. So this is my normal flask size. This is a 4-inch diameter by 6 inches tall. I could, in theory, go a little bit deeper, down to a 7. I'm not sure it would make that much of a difference, but at least you have the option. And I think the thing I like the most about this setup, especially that hole being there, is that if I ever had a blowout situation where the metal started pouring out, molten and investment everywhere and whatever, is that it's not going to drop straight down into the hole, get plugged, and have to be taken apart. It's well thought out in that sense that if you do have failure, it's not the end of the world. It's pretty easy to clean out. You could just pull the metal off the bottom and reuse it in theory. This comes with adapter plates. It comes with 3 of them particularly. This one is mostly flat with a hole in the middle. This one is designed for the older flasks that don't have the holes around the outside, the perforated ones. you basically just put your flask on top and it just pulls from the bottom. There are wax nets that I've seen you can put around, or sometimes you put straws in them, and you also kind of carve the bottom into a dome, and all of those things help pull the metal down. In my opinion, I've only done one or two, by the way, because you can see by the burn ring on here. In my opinion, this is just maybe not the way to go. I would do this with like extremely small flasks where, say, I was doing like a gold job or something where I just needed like one piece. It's good to have, but I definitely recommend perforated flasks whenever you can. And then there's this plate. This is the middle one. This is the one that fits with the flask that comes with this machine. This machine is sold as a kit, by the way. So all of these, it comes with one flask, a pair of tongs, the dome, the rubber pad for this, things like that. So yeah, this one is meant for the perforated flasks, and you can see this one has seen quite a bit more use. The burn ring on these silicon gaskets, it only gets worse as you go, and you'll see in the next one, it's even worse. This is what's left of my 4-inch flask gasket. Believe it or not, this still works. These are considered a consumable item, and you will consume through them very quickly. However, this is still the first one that I've ever had with this machine, and it might be paper thin now and really gross looking, but it still works. I do have some extras on hand. I believe this is what they look like new, so you can kind of see the difference. Like, they're gross. So aside from the adapter plates, it also comes with this big gasket, which just fits over this main one. So I believe this one's for non-perf. This is for 3 3/8 flasks. This is for 4-inch. And then you can cast without any adapter plate, just straight on. And obviously the ring on this is much wider. I believe it's for 5-inch, but don't quote me. I don't think they actually recommend you do it this way, but I have done it and it worked fine. So the way I'll use my machine is like this. I'll put the main gasket down, then I'll put an adapter plate on top, and then the main one. And this all just helps get a seal. You'll see on the main dial, the only dial, that if you get a good seal, this will go right up to, well, it really depends on where you're living. Pressure-wise, if you are above or below sea level, it does affect how many, I don't exactly know what this is. I go with bar. Bar is, I believe, the European method, or we just don't use it so much over here. We use PSI. Anyway, this will go like right down to -1 bar, which is a good level. That's exactly where you want it, as much vacuum as you can possibly get. So if your gaskets are in bad shape, you will notice it gets harder to create a good seal. I have these monster gnarly tongs that I use, so I'll put my flask in and I'll kind of like push down and try to seat it, watching the dial as I go, and that eventually does work every time so far. By the way, these tongs were custom made. I made them. The little tongs that come with them, I think, are kind of rinky-dink, honestly. Like, they are dangerously flimsy almost. So if I had to recommend one thing to get with this machine as like an upgrade, it would be a better set of tongs. So honestly, there's not a whole lot else to talk about this machine. It's a very simple tool. It's one of those, like, you know, $1,500 tools that does one thing really well and you can't do your job without it. That's a prime example, something like this. I think it's a great tool. It's very robust. As I mentioned before, I've had, investment burst out of my flasks and flow all over the place, and the machine is perfectly fine. I've never actually opened it up, but I suspect it's a very simple tool, and simplicity, I think, is very key here because it just works really well. So if you're still here and you want to see how I'm going to change the oil, feel free to stick around. If not, I'll see you in the next video. All right, so just like changing oil on a car, you can see here there's a little nut. This just attaches into the vacuum pump. I'm going to use this container to catch the oil, and I'm also going to use this one because it has measuring lines, so I know how much oil I'm putting back in. After I dump the bad stuff out of this, I'll be able to match it. So let's see. I'm just going to put the cup under but out of view. And we'll just let that drain away. So we've emptied out all the oil from the vacuum, and this is what we have. I've got about a cup of this kind of gross oil in there. You can kind of see the difference between the two. Same-ish yellow color, but definitely a little darker. I'm going to be putting less oil back in. This was about a cup, as I said, and that's too much. So to take this off, simply use a wrench. And this one comes with a nice little filler nozzle thing. I'm going to aim to put about 3/4 of a cup back in, as mess-free as possible. You will not see the little window immediately start to fill up with this stuff. It kind of needs to work its way through the system. So something that I haven't done that you can do if you would like, if you just see too much sediment in the little window, there's a product you can get called flushing oil, which I think it's just like a similar version of this stuff, or maybe it's mineral oil. I'm not really sure what it is exactly, but it's an oil base. You put it in and you just let it run through your system, and it will start to clean out all the gunk. So that's all I really have to say for this product. They're great. If you're interested in doing casting and doing it yourself specifically, then I would recommend this. It's a really good place to start. The combination units is just exponentially better than having to spend, about thousands of dollars, honestly, on two separate machines that are doing fundamentally the same thing. The overall cost is very manageable for a small business. So the quality I'm getting from this machine is pretty good for the cost that you're putting in. It's not going to be anywhere near, like a $40,000 Galani or Yasui or NewTek or whatever, with the whole gas shielding, and those are just an entirely new league unto themselves. This is definitely going to do for, I would say, the higher end hobbyist, low end prosumer, if that makes any sense. It's hard to classify exactly where this would go. If you're going to be doing casting as like your big business, you want to become a casting house, you're probably going to be putting like hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million into that. So look, you can look at other videos. This one is not aimed at that type of person with that goal. But if you're an artisan jeweler, you just want to make your own stuff, this is definitely a good place to start. Strongly recommend this machine. So if you found this informative, we have plenty of other videos. Please check out our other content. We do have a new membership program. If you're interested, there's additional information that we give out with that, more in line with the resins and tips and tricks and things like that, but there are other advantages, so please take a look if you're interested there. So that's it for this video. I will see you guys in the next one.